Hello and welcome to the Future of Financial Forecasting. My name is Mike Crook and I'll be your host for today's webinar with Eric Merrill from Deloitte. So here's the agenda for today's webinar. I'll kick things off with a little background from Tableau, and then I'll turn things over to Eric, who will explore the future of forecasting and provide you a demo of Precision View. If at any point along the way you have questions, please post them into the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them during the Q&A portion. So at Tableau, a big part of my job is sharing our story with our customers. I'd highly encourage you to check out our Tableau on Tableau presentation and our recent webinars on data prep. If you find these, you will find these and other incredible resources on our Finance Analytics Solutions site and on Tableau Public. Before we jump into the presentation from Deloitte, I know there are a few people on this webinar who may be unfamiliar with Tableau, so I want to quickly give you some sense of our company and our analytics platform. So Tableau has always been focused on one thing: people. We believe that people are your greatest asset. And then there is data. The data you spend millions of dollars capturing, curating, cleaning, and storing can be used to make people even more valuable. If you can get the data into the hands of the people who know the business, that's when the magic can happen. And this is the Tableau platform that empowers people to make an impact with their data. The foundation is the ability to connect to your data wherever you have chosen to store it. And the impact that you can make begins with the many ways that you can access and share your insights. People I talk to in finance love this platform because Tableau delivers powerful analytics that people love to use and reduces the time they spend in manual and repetitive grunt work. The platform is flexible enough to bring all of your data together and put it into the hands of the people who need it to make an impact. And IT knows and loves this product. It is an integrated platform that's secure, trusted, and governed. And this is the Tableau, and like I was saying, I spend a lot of time here at Tableau showing how we use Tableau for finance analytics. As you can see, there is almost no part of our finance department where we're not using Tableau. Many of these use cases have been featured in our webinar content, which I'd encourage you to check out, or join us at Tableau Conference in Las Vegas next month to see what our customers are doing in these spaces. At TC, you will hear from customers like Miles Squibb, who will be presenting about how their finance operations team is using Tableau. And a few members of my team will be joining me in a hands-on training session focused on how to prep messy finance data. I'll also be hosting a meetup for the Office of Finance at the conference, where you can meet me and other finance professionals that are using Tableau. I'd love to see you there. So I showed you some of the areas that we're using Tableau in our finance department, but how did we get there? When Tableau started out using our product for finance analytics, there was very much a start small and keep it simple approach. Identifying high-value use cases, downloading spreadsheets, bringing data together, and improving valuable data analysis with Tableau Desktop. As Tableau Server was released in 2007, Tableau saw the opportunity to start scaling the impact of our work by creating sources of truth that would fuel a self-service analytics model. This included both data sources and certified dashboards on Tableau Server to support our reporting, financial planning, and analysis. Over the past couple of years, we have scaled the impact of this self-service analytic model by migrating our on-prem data to the cloud. By leveraging a next-generation data warehouses as a service platform, we now have a data platform that can dynamically scale at our rapid pace of growth. This scalability has allowed us to capture more secure sources of truth and fuel our business and enable self-service data prep. And now as you look out at as we look out at our next big opportunity, we're incorporating more advanced analytic modeling into the work to drive additional impact. And that's why I'm excited to host Deloitte today to talk about how they're doing so with Tableau in a product they call Precision View. Before they begin, I do want to clarify that we don't use Precision View ourselves here at Tableau, since we prefer to develop most of our analytics projects in-house. However, having seen this presentation, I've found Deloitte's approach interesting, fascinating, and inspirational, and I realize many of our customers would as well. With that, I want to turn things over to Eric.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Merrill. I'm a managing director within the consulting practice of Deloitte. I focus in on the office of the CFO and help bring some of our most advanced analytical solutions to our clients in the business, finance, and analytics space. Precision View, which we're going to talk about today, is part of our digital finance offering, or part of our finance in a digital world perspective. Some of you may or may not be familiar with our perspectives on digital finance that are out and about in the marketplace. One of the pieces we're going to go into today is a bit of level setting or foundational element is our Finance 2025 perspective. And so we came up with a number of predictions around Finance 2025, 8 specifically, with the intent of putting these predictions out far enough in the future that there's time to be truly transformative to the function. You know, sometimes when you look out a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead, there's a tendency to be a tad incremental in the approach to transforming finance. And so by casting a further net, if you will, throwing it a little further out into the water, gives the opportunity to think bigger and make bigger change within the function. And so I want to talk through with you briefly today as we think about some big changes coming about for finance. One is around the finance factory. So transactions moving towards touchless, thinking about how automation and blockchain can help finance operations be more efficient. Thinking through the role of finance. If operations truly achieve that degree of automation, where will finance focus? Will it be around business insights and service? We believe so. Thinking through finance cycles. How does the world change when finance can really go real time? And periodic reporting isn't really the anchor of decision making that, you know, some may argue it isn't today, others it may be today, but that world will change. Self-service, and you know, part of why I'm very excited to be here as part of our partnership with Tableau and talk to you today, enabling self-service is going to be the norm. Finance is going to have to go through a bit of a mindset shift, if they haven't already, around enabling self-service and giving the business the tools that it needs to really support decision-making. Thinking through operating models, service delivery models will emerge that require a focus and a capability around managing a lot of this digital finance content and capability. It will require a diverse workforce. There may be new ways of thinking about gig workers, freelancers, and how to source from the crowd. Enterprise resource planning will change as well. Big ERP vendors are already showing movement towards how they're acquiring and integrating with what we would refer to as microservices or some of these emerging capabilities that are out there in the marketplace today. We expect that trend to continue. Around data has proliferated in the last couple of years even to an extent that few can imagine. That exponential growth of data will require new ways of thinking and new levels of integration to truly leverage, manage, and get value from it within the organization. And then lastly, workforce and workplace. Finance employees will be doing new things in new ways. Some of this will be stretching the traditional models, the traditional functional models especially, around how many organizations think about and manage their talent today. Don't want to spend too much time going across that broad brush of predictions because I want to make sure that we have time to get into the predictive analytics topic for today, but wanted to lay that out there as a bit of background for everybody. If we're going to drill in around business finance and analytics, it's an opportunity to talk about what some of the key challenges we see across our client base look like today. Some are struggling with alignment of strategy from top to bottom. Usually organizations have a very solid degree of confidence in their strategy at the top level. Not always is it cascaded down and KPIs are really tracking to all levels of the organization in a way that's tangible and executable. Process discipline. Sometimes there lacks a formal mechanism for really measuring, monitoring, and evaluating performance of those processes from top to bottom. And that's not just measuring organizational performance, but performance of the process itself to make sure that the activity is being done efficiently, effectively, and is focused on value-added activity. Roles and responsibilities. In a number of matrixed organizations, it's not always clear who has what decision-making authority and where and how that plays into the process, be it around a forecast or decision rights in general. Clarity there can really help drive decisions more expeditiously. Exploiting technology. A number of our clients have gone down the path at one point or another of investing in shiny objects or the latest and greatest, new planning tools, new reporting tools, new visualization tools. At a point today where really getting value from those investments requires rethinking a few things. And so thinking about how to exploit the technology that you have or that you may invest in and getting a return for that investment is as critical now as ever before. And then looking at culture. And I think that it's one of those areas that clear directives from senior management, sometimes are not as clearly cascaded as they could or should be, or there's a need for certain analytical tool sets or capabilities at more operational levels that don't always mesh with decisions that are handed down. And so understanding that to go down the path of putting in place something like predictive analytics often requires a bit of diversity of thought in terms of how you're going to think about the work that finance does and the culture that's necessary to support it. So as we think about companies that are embarking on forecast and forecast analytics type of processes and trying to change them and use some of the things we're going to talk about today around advanced data science, machine learning, visualization, predictive analytics, all wrapped up and integrated into the forecast process. Some of the things that we run into and that are pretty common across our client base, fear and loathing, and maybe that's a little bit of an excessive term for it, but really getting to the point that it makes people uncomfortable sometimes to think about using algorithms to forecast the business and how that process would work in the future and how they might interact with those types of tools and capabilities if they were really put to use. Some of it is around seeing the bigger picture. A lot of times if you've got a specific area of accountability, driving excellence in that specific focus area is really what folks really anchor in on, and thinking a little bit more broadly is typically what's needed to really embrace the promise of predictive analytics. Getting engagement across the organization from leadership, from technology is critical. Realizing that algorithmic forecasting is not a silver bullet. Some people look at machine learning driven forecasting as, well, that's going to be 100% accurate all the time. It's going to enable us to see around corners. And I think the reality is the capability is not quite there yet. What is there is a way to very rapidly go through massive amounts of data and drivers and operational inputs and make sense of what matters and what doesn't, and what historically has really influenced financial outcomes, and being able to bubble that to the surface and then put it into a capability like we're going to see today where you can make use of it, you can interact with it, it can make you more efficient and effective at forecasting the organization. Fear of black boxes and not wanting to get that one number that just emerged out of nowhere and can't be explained, that has never made finance comfortable. And so being able to understand the approaches that are used from a data science and a machine learning standpoint and how to interact with them and what types of skills and capabilities that requires, what types of problems it can and cannot solve becomes very important. Turf battles gets into who owns it, and is it a finance function, is it a technology function? I've seen both. And typically the collaboration is what's required to make that work. And then data everywhere. And so companies are struggling with the proliferation of data, the types of data, how to manage it, how to govern the master data around it so that it can be useful. And so those are all very common conversations that we're engaging in today with our clients. We think about the evolution of analytics. A lot of companies focus on getting hindsight right. Comparisons versus last year, operational reporting on actuals, and how to really bring together and automate getting a lot of this information together just to be able to reduce the amount of time that finance spends on aggregating data. Focused on developing insight, moving towards advanced visualization, using tools like Tableau to really unearth what are the exceptions that we should be focused on to make the right business decisions, and how do we do that faster. Making that available in the cloud so it's available anywhere, anytime, on any type of device, and really helping to enable finance to get to the meaning of the information and not just get buried in the information itself. Making the pivot, and this is where we're starting the conversation today, past visualization and looking backwards, and how do you leverage those tools and that historical information to provide foresight, applying algorithmic forecasting, using machine learning, making those capabilities available on demand so that the forecast processes and the decision making around them can be done more rapidly, and the impact assessments of what the meaning of certain decisions might be can become readily available. And then amplified intelligence, and this is where you start to apply more cognitive capabilities around advanced artificial intelligence, natural language tools, chatbots, potentially augmented and virtual reality, and thinking really about the service delivery models around, if these capabilities are going to scale, are going to become industrialized in your organization, what are the best ways to own, manage, and deploy them and scale them appropriately? When we think about solving these problems in finance, we tend to think of it through the lens of building and freeing up capacity. So automating away the work that should be more streamlined to create capacity, which then allows business finance and FP&A to focus on capability building, which will ultimately allow them to be better business partners and collaborate more actively and proactively with the organization. At the end of the day, most of the finance organizations that we work with are looking to maintain or enhance their credibility with investors, with the board, with the executive team, with business owners. And that really flows together well and starts to help think about how you go about making these types of changes and free up the experts within your organization to really support and drive the capability and the collaboration elements. I'd like you to think about for a second, and those of you in the business finance space may be able to relate to this particularly well. When you think about forecasting and reporting, on the left we have a common story that we hear around what does an FP&A planner or analyst do today. There's a lot of steps that go into aggregating and pulling the information that they use today, dropping it into flat files and spreadsheets. If they're lucky, they've got a tool like a Tableau to visualize and bring it to life. But typically they're massaging that data. Then, even if they have a visualization tool, they're likely still copying and pasting, taking snapshots, putting it into PowerPoint at some point or some other visualization presentation platform, sharing that information, sending it around manually with business partners for feedback, getting that feedback, and iterating all the while on this. And think about how that world can be different if you take the first 5 steps of that day and they're automated. And then you take the next couple steps and using tools like Tableau, you're able to really enable collaboration in a very visual way, capture feedback in a cloud-based environment that's real time, and really enables you to get faster feedback and better alignment on the outcomes and the insights that you're providing. And then think about, what if you were to take that a step farther and you wanted to be able to then model scenarios based on that feedback in real time and leverage some advanced data science techniques that have already identified the relationships between the different drivers of your business and allow you to quickly and easily modify those and produce an updated output and reshare in real time. And so it changes the nature of the work a little bit and allows you to really focus on what information is needed to drive and deliver insight, as opposed to spending a lot of time going and collecting the information, having to massage the data to get it to play nicely together. So there's a lot of work that goes into getting to that process, but I think the big theme with a lot of the tools that are out there today is, and Mike said it earlier, you can start small. And starting small allows you to identify and achieve quick wins, which then set you up to industrialize and really roll out solutions that can drive a lot of value for your organization. If we think about what the future of performance management looks like, processes are streamlined, analytics and insight delivery are enabled through visualization, leveraging AI type capabilities, whether it's machine learning or natural language generation or chatbots or all the above, data is accessible and integrated, and it's been brought together in a way that enables a better way for business finance to do its work. Systems are connected in an ideal world, but even where they're not, or that's not immediately possible, there are ways to bring the information from those systems together. And the ability of finance to support all these new capabilities with next generation skills and support the organization, it may be organized a little differently tomorrow than it is today. So what does that look like if we weave it all together? Because at the end of the day, performance management and getting insight from an organization's information, both historically and forward-looking, is really what we're looking to achieve. And so we've stitched together what our perspective on linking all this into a streamlined process looks like. And around intelligent automation, you're scraping and looking for data and pulling together multiple data sources, and you're feeding that in to a model that not only is able to rapidly produce a predictive output, a forecast output, leveraging a combination of trends and drivers and external inputs and internal inputs, but it learns over time. And so it understands when an anomaly occurs and how to handle that when producing forecasts going forward. And it's able to take input and adjustments and overlays and things that are business exception-based inputs and incorporate that appropriately into the forecast and produce an output that then is interactive and can be visualized. And not only visualized in a read-only format, but visualized in an interactive way that if I want to go and change assumptions, I can create scenarios on the fly. Because what that's going to allow me to do is identify opportunities and risks and incorporate those into the forecast and share that in real time so that my peers, my colleagues, my superiors all have visibility into what real-time insights on our performance are going to look like and what might move the needle this month, this quarter, this year. Because ultimately we're trying to accelerate decision-making by creating this platform, this integrated platform that is more visual, provides better insight into the underlying drivers of the business, and really automates a lot of the process around data collection and also the predictive analytics and forecasting elements of how do I forecast and plan the business, and put that tool in the hands of my teams that do that work so that they can be more effective at their jobs and focus on helping us make the right business decisions. So we've talked a little bit and been alluding to the topic of algorithmic forecasting. And so what does that look like? It, interestingly enough, still does and needs to include human intelligence. I know there's some thought out there that says the human side of forecasting goes away. The human side goes away with predictive analytics, and that's not really true. Our perspective would be that the human intelligence plays a critical role in planning and forecasting going forward. What changes is the nature of that role. And so you move away from being more focused on data aggregation, data cleansing, pulling information together from multiple sources, and you're able to pivot and really focus more instead on exception management and identifying what is that big contract that's under negotiation with a customer? What is that big initiative that we're going to launch that's going to move the needle that's different than what we've done in the past? And so that's really where we see human interaction and intelligence coming in. It changes the interaction model, and it definitely changes the skills and capabilities that you may be looking for. Those who wrangle data are still highly valued, but maybe in a different part of the process. AI applications, that's where the machine learning comes in. That's where the cognitive capabilities to pull in unstructured data come in. That's where the ability to automate the evaluation of what drivers are influential and what algorithms provide the best potential forecasts, and automate the process of generating that. Understandably uses significantly modern computing capabilities, cloud-based, in-memory, the ability to dynamically reallocate resources to crunch massive data sets and numbers. Hugely helpful. I mean, I've been in this space now for over a decade, and seeing the progression of technology and how it really has fundamentally changed the capabilities of models that could take, in a pre-cloud, pre-in-memory environment, models that would run for 10 to 14 hours at a time, now can be run in under a minute. And so it's amazing what the acceleration of technology and technology capabilities offer. We talked a little bit about data sources, being able to automate the integration of macroeconomic indices and industry indicators and commodity data and FX data and operational information from your trade promotion activity, from your supply chain, from your human capital and HR systems. Being able to integrate all that information in a way to feed into a model that dynamically makes sense of what it looks like because you've established an advanced analytics platform and a capability. Everything from how that data comes in to how that data gets presented and interacted with from a user experience standpoint through a platform like Tableau becomes a much more streamlined and efficient process. So just a deeper dive on what algorithmic forecasting is, and I think we've got some materials queued up on the side here that may be able to help you take a deeper dive as well. But let's try to separate a little bit of fact and fiction. So what the basics are is that algorithmic forecasting uses statistical models to describe what's likely to happen in the future. And it does this by looking at huge amounts of historical data across structured, unstructured data, internal data like financial history, operational information, key metrics, key inputs around maybe supporting processes that you have, as well as external data like some of the things that I mentioned. There's a lot that can happen in this process where there's even more value when you've got it well integrated into your process and you're able to start identifying and measuring where are biases creeping into the forecast. Where are there anomalies in the data? Where are there certain events that need to be incorporated? And the models can help course correct for those over time as they learn and get smarter. The machines help keep the humans honest. They've helped to evaluate objectively the information that's coming in and provide a starting point or a baseline for humans to react to and think about what are the real anomalies or the exceptions that we want to manage against, as opposed to having to always build, from the absolute bottom up. And I think that the important thing here, and this is a point in time conversation, is that algorithmic forecasting does not create things out of thin air. And I think that's kind of, putting the pin in the balloon a little bit to say it's not going to deliver 100% precision, but it's going to be a very effective approach and way for you to get more value out of your planning, budgeting, and forecasting efforts. If I think about the number of analysts that are required to pull data together and crunch the numbers and produce the output and second guess the assumptions and do all of that work, being able to have a platform that enables a much faster cycle time is hugely beneficial to being able to drive more value out of that process. Even if it's not creating completely new information, it's helping to make sense of all the information that's out there in a much more efficient and effective way. I think the other key thing to call out is that, if I were having this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, we'd be talking about it in theoretical terms. And we'd be wondering, is anybody on this journey? Is anybody trying to put algorithmic forecasting into their processes or use more machine-driven forecasting? And I can tell you firsthand that, there are a number of clients that I've worked with recently in the last, 2 to 3 years that are either heavy into this conversation and looking for perspective on how to make it successful, and they're doing it themselves based on capabilities that they've staffed up in their analytics and finance teams, or are looking for help and support in how do I go about structuring my organization to build this type of capability to get us off the ground and running and be something that we incorporate into how we become a more effective organization going forward. Some of the use cases, just as examples, a lot in the target setting and forecasting integrated financial statements across P&L, working capital, and cash flow. I would say working capital, indirect and direct cash most recently seem to be some of the hottest topics that I've come across, or topics of interest that I've come across with clients. Demand forecasting has always been, a candidate in this space, as well as, even extending into, more tax and treasury and looking at the trade-offs and revenue and profit implications of applying this type of approach and using it to model the potential outcomes. Product level forecasting, market and country level, always been candidates in this space. Looking at some creative use cases around customer or even employee retention, inventory optimization, and then as you think about that credibility lens, looking to provide guidance outside. So, what are our EPS ranges and targets going to look like? What kind of guidance do we want to issue to the marketplace? Are all, great examples of where we're seeing this type of approach be applied more and more frequently, or the interest and desire to move towards this approach is a hot topic of conversation. One of the things that I did want to share with you is a client success story. It's actually featured in our Crunch Time 6 article on algorithmic forecasting that's available for your review should you be interested in the topic. Basically, we ran into an organization where global consumer products manufacturer. You'd be familiar with some of their products if we disclosed their name. It's something that you would use, on a day-to-day basis for projects and things that you'd want to do, around the home potentially. They were looking at a situation where they were experiencing such great growth that their ability to project and share with their board where they thought they were going to land, they were always outperforming. And so I know there are a number of folks that would love to have that problem, but what they were encountering was a reality that said, well, we're not sure that you guys have a perspective on where your business is going because you seem to be underestimating it. And so we worked with them to help develop a prototype that took a top-down approach to forecasting. And so what we did was we gathered a bunch of their financial history, their operational data. We looked at external data. We actually looked at social media data. And we went through and using the analytical approach that we use in our Precision View platform, our solution, we helped to analyze and come up with highly accurate models around major categories of the P&L, of working capital, and cash flow. And so what they've been able to do is take that solution, integrate it into their planning process, and actually work with their business units around creating a more efficient approach to forecasting that leverages these data science capabilities, these algorithms, and provides better insight into the drivers that are impacting their business, how, if they adjust their assumptions around those drivers, they'll flow through to the financials, and really been able to accelerate the pace at which they're able to model different outcomes and use that to support not just decisions, but also performance management discussions within the organization. So that's a great example of where this type of capability has become ingrained in their ways of working, and really changed the way they do their work around planning, budgeting, and forecasting. So I'll pause there for a second. I think we're going to jump into a live example actually, and so. One of the things I would say as a disclaimer here before we start the screen share, or as we're starting the screen share, is that this is a solution where I'd say the data has been masked to protect the innocent. However, the use case is real. And so hopefully what you can see on my screen is a dashboard using Tableau and the latest iteration of Tableau. And what we really like about the solution in this case, and you'll see it's historically oriented because the project's been completed for a while now, but there's a couple of key capabilities that we can showcase leveraging the latest and greatest from Tableau that I think is important to see. One is this box down here on the right. And so, there's now an ability to plug in and actually use natural language commentary within your dashboards in Tableau. It's, additional software, separate relationship, but it's a key capability that helps to automate and really accelerate the time to insight. Obviously benefits from, however granular or however well-structured your data is, but can provide some really great insights. And what we're showing here just really scratches the surface at the best. The other thing that I would call out and call to your attention is that what we'll see here in a minute as I go through the demo is that there's a newer ability within Tableau to be able to call out and execute data science functions remotely. And so one of the key breakthroughs that we had with this version of our solution, of our Precision View solution on Tableau, is that we now have the ability to model scenarios. And I'll show you that in a second when we get to the planning cockpit, as I think it's a pretty cool feature that typically had been reserved more for, the wider array of planning platforms. So it now really makes this a viable use case for a planning group to be able to use it and model different scenarios and store those scenarios and call those up. So in terms of providing an overview, what you see here may set up as a typical dashboard. What's a little different is that you'll see we've got 4 different points of comparison here. One is around an operating plan. So this is your traditional bottom-up organizational output where hundreds of people across the organization have contributed up through multiple business units. It's all been rolled up from business unit to geography to line of business, and you're seeing the net result. We're looking at the top of the company. What you also see, though, is this gray line, which is a likely forecast. And what's interesting about the likely forecast is that the likely forecast is completely machine generated. And so everything from what model was used to produce it, which algorithm, to the drivers that were selected, the forecasts of those drivers, and the roll-up and aggregation of that work is all done and generated in an automated fashion, and done through calls that Tableau can make to an external analytics platform to generate that outcome. You also see a high and low driver forecast around that likely forecast. And so what's exciting about that is, as a planner, you have control over what assumptions you want to model to create not just the point estimate of the likely forecast, which you might use to compare against the bottom up, or you might use it as a target setting process to give guidance, but you also have the ability to provide a range, and that range, which you can control how wide and how small it is based on your assumptions, can really be a very different perspective around what the outcomes might be. It's no longer just a point estimate. You can actually talk about a range of outcomes. Now, if you take into context the story that I shared around, overperforming and, overperforming estimates, you can understand why some of these operational plans versus the predictive numbers might be a little different. From a sales perspective, organization saying it's going to land at, 1.2 billion. On the other hand, the machine's thinking the forecast is going to be a little higher. In this case, I think the machine's probably a lot closer to right. You'll also see that we've embedded some year-over-year and quarter-over-quarter metrics, and we're focused on, in this case, sales, adjusted margin, SG&A, operating margin, working capital, and cash flow. And to the integrated financial statement perspective, we've had clients that have wanted to go deep on net sales. We've had clients that have said, well, we really want to dig into working capital. And we've had others that have said, no, we want to go look at a comparison between direct and indirect cash flow methodologies and see, which one over what period of time is going to produce a better outcome or a more accurate outcome for us. You do see we've also distilled down a quarterly EPS number, so you can pull that out of what we were projecting in the data underneath. Down here at the bottom, you have a bit more detailed information, the ability to pivot through, any of the different metrics that you'd like to look at. And so we're going to go on a deeper dive on this here in a second. But the cool thing is you'll see as we pull up the information, and we're looking at 2018 just to have a consistent data set, you can customize any and all of these views. We've had clients that want their own specific KPIs reflected here. We'll work with them on defining those KPIs and how they cascade through the organization. But you'll also notice that the commentary rewrites as the context changes. And so just some cool feature functionality there that's worth noting. If we think about this from a predictive modeling standpoint, I'm going to click through to what we call our heat map. And so the heat map here, again, we're looking at sales, lets you see the stack up of a couple different algorithms, lets you see the historical accuracy on a monthly basis of those algorithms across multiple business segments. And so, if we want to get creative here, we'll look in and say, okay, so this particular methodology seems to be generating the best accuracy. How is that looking on a month-by-month basis? And this is all highly configurable, and obviously, the visuals are great, and there's a lot of flexibility there too. If this is something you're looking at from an annual basis, you might want to anchor on annual accuracy. A lot of my clients look at quarterly forecast accuracy. Others drill in and really want to look at monthly or even weekly. And so you can take this approach and scale it to, really whatever you find to be the most beneficial or the most important to focus on, what problem you're trying to solve specifically. If we go from the heat map to the planning cockpit, this is where I would say a lot of the magic happens. And so this is where you're taking the output and the understanding of this process and what we've tested and found from an algorithmic forecasting perspective, which model is the best model, what kind of output gets generated, and you get to drill in a little deeper. And so here is where, based on the model that we're looking at, in this case it's a dynamic regression model, I could go back and change that and pivot and look at a different type of model. You can see both the accuracy of the model as well as look at the specific account and see how the high, low, and likely forecasts versus actuals are all planning out. You also have at the bottom of the page the result of all the data science testing that we've done. And there's obviously a lot more information around behind all these drivers around how were they scored, how were they selected. There's a process that we program around the data science coding and the machine learning coding to identify which drivers and how many get pulled forward and populated. But that said, you have the ability to go in and basically decide, do you want to focus on the controllable drivers or the levers that you can actually influence, or the non-controllable drivers or potentially things that you might try to hedge against but don't necessarily have direct control over unless somehow you're independently wealthy and able to start a number of new households or spend enough money to move the needle on U.S. home improvements in this case. But salaries and wages might be something that you have the ability to budget for differently. Maybe you want to increase the budget, maybe increase the budget. In terms of U.S. Building permits, maybe you're bullish and you think this is going to continue, and so you increase the index there, you decrease it here. And what you have the ability to do now is you can actually go in and say, we're going to call this demo 21, or we'll call it demo 1010, given where we are, and you're going to hit submit. And this is the functionality I was talking about that previously really wasn't available in any accessible way in Tableau, and we found it much better and easier to work with now, where we have the ability to actually store and build these scenarios in the tool, and so in the platform. And so it makes it from previously we would position Tableau in our solution as more of a just visualize the results and see, what happened. And now we're able to treat it more as a very interactive and critical component where you can build and model different scenarios. It really, if you think about what's happening now that I've clicked submit, it's basically taken the driver values that I've modified, packaged them up, it's shipping them off to the data science platform, which is going through and recalculating all the scenarios. It's retesting the variables. It's basically creating new coefficients for the equations and rerunning the math. And so, while it takes up to a minute to get this process going, ultimately what we'll be able to do is go back to the executive summary, and if we wanted to, we could pull up demo 1010 and actually see the resulting financials and how that's different. And how those changes have impacted the high, the low, and the different scenarios. So really cool to be able to do that and review that. It's actually one of the key functionalities that has been a real big positive for us here in terms of being able to use this platform and work with Tableau to do so. So we've been very happy with those improvements. So while that's running in the background, I think this would basically conclude the demo anyways. This is the last step of the process. And so given that the data, like I said, is kind of test data, so you won't necessarily be able to see the actual impact of those drivers in this data set you would in your data or in production data. I think we can probably pivot back to the slides and continue the conversation if that's all right. Okay, so it looks like we're back on the slides. So if I were to summarize what you just saw in terms of the platform, that is an example of what we would call our Precision View platform at Deloitte. We developed it because of an opportunity we saw in the marketplace. Organizations were struggling with bringing multiple different data sets together, having a challenge in the financial forecasting process, it was always described, or often is described, as a challenge around accuracy, but as you dig underneath it, it's a lot around the transparency into the underlying business drivers. It's a lot about inconsistency in modeling approach around how organizations and different parts of organizations build their own models and structure their models and the KPIs that they use. What we came up with, and the major components of Precision View, are around the predictive analytics piece, which is where we bring in the econometric and driver-based models. Machine learning, where we automate a lot of the process around driver identification, driver selection, defining that driver relationship. Visualization and CFO dashboards, and you saw just one example, and there's a lot of flexibility in Tableau. So those visuals, if you looked at those and said those aren't what I would use in my organization, or I need to look at things differently, or I really would want to deep dive on a certain topic, whether it's dissecting the drivers of working capital around DIO, DPO, DSO, that's possible. Digging into cash, that's another great area that we've got a lot of examples on Tableau of how we would structure that analysis. Ultimately yields greater agility around modeling and budget setting, target setting, and running scenarios. And so if we go back to what are we trying to help finance do, it's increase capacity, have greater capability, and frankly, in many cases, it's more consistent capability, as well as enable more effective collaboration. For those of you maybe a little curious around how we got there, it's a phased approach. We go through and look at driver identification using the data science processes. We then apply the predictive algorithms, and then we look at building the models in terms of how we structure the flow through from a P&L, cash flow, and balance sheet perspective, especially as we're enabling the scenarios around exposing the different drivers and how you can modify and change those. And so this yields a more responsive approach to planning, where you're able to leverage machine-based analytical approaches, still have that human interaction model around how you're going to manage the drivers, potentially providing your own specific guidance around assumptions and drivers. Also using the scenario modeling capability to create multiple outcomes that are tiered appropriately based on the different assumptions that you want to make, and seeing how those cascade and flow through throughout the financial statements, and then automating the approach behind it. So, taking the work that you don't want humans doing because it's value added, but it's also something that is possible to automate now more than ever before, and have the humans focus on reviewing the output of those processes, so they're focusing their knowledge and expertise where it's most helpful around decision making, as opposed to around the mechanics of the process. So if you think about what we've heard from some of our clients, or what we propose as the benefits of taking this type of approach, improved confidence in the guidance produced, potentially the ability to more tightly manage production around waste and loss. We see inventory and working capital improvements in companies that are taking this type of approach, more timely identification and response to opportunities, improved efficiency, as you've integrated some of the finance processes that otherwise would be disparate, and then being able to reallocate resources to value-added analysis, as opposed to the blocking and tackling of preparing all the information for analysis, and then leveraging a tool like Tableau to really structure that conversation around performance management and really pull out the insights, especially if you're looking down the path of plugging in natural language generation or other elements that will help really pull out the so what from the information. So from a demo and content perspective, that's what I was hoping to share with you today. I appreciate the interest and the attendance today. It looks like we had a good number of folks. Mike, I don't know if it's appropriate to hand it back to you at this point.
Yes, thanks, Eric. So, Eric, it's always awesome to see what our partners and our customers are able to do with the Tableau platform, and exciting to see how you're integrating the extensibility API and the ability to interact Tableau dashboards with some of the other tools out there. So, at the moment, I'm only seeing kind of 3 questions that our attendees have submitted. If anybody has anything else, now's the time to get those in there. And so I'm just going to kind of run these through with you really quick, Eric. I think maybe a combination of your answers and my answers will hopefully help these folks out. But so one of the questions is kind of how much technology is really kind of all behind this. I don't know if you want to mention any of the platforms that you're connecting to beyond Tableau, but
Sure.
if you want to just mention just maybe what those technologies are, that would be awesome.
Yep, absolutely. No, and no problem at all. Typically, there's a data warehousing platform, data warehousing, data lake type of platform, because we like to integrate financial ledger history with operational data as well as external data. It's good to have that information kind of aggregated in a central place. Sometimes that same platform is what we will use to run the analytics, the data science, and the machine learning. Sometimes it's a separate platform. So we've done this type of work, kind of across the Google Cloud platforms and the Amazon Web Services of the world, as well as with SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft Azure. So there are others that we are working with or exploring as well. But those are kind of the core underneath. And then, I think there's a decision to be made if the scenario modeling capability in Tableau works, or if it's more the visualization component that you're after. We have had some clients also plug in a planning tool. And again, we're kind of platform agnostic in general, so we've worked with most, if not all of them.
Thanks, Eric. And I think I answered this in my opening statements to you, but you guys are using the extensibility API to pass those parameters out of the dashboard and into your models, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Yep. And then, I don't think we want to mention any specific platforms since we're trying to stay agnostic, and that's the beauty of Tableau and many of the things that we're trying to do. Somebody's asking a question is like, how much data do you need? I think the reality there is the more data we have, the better our models can predict. And that's, I think one of the beauties of, you mentioning the cloud and, using these next generation data platforms as a service, but also even with Tableau is, it has the ability to handle, the millions and billions of rows of data, and it doesn't have to be pre-aggregated. They're talking about, if you guys are using, Python or other technologies. I don't know if you are, but certainly Tableau does have the ability to integrate with R and Python.
Mm-hmm. And that is we do use those components as well.
I expected so, but I didn't want to make assumptions.
Yep.
And then, somebody's asking just from a curiosity perspective, kind of, how long it took you guys to build some of those dashboards that you're presenting the information from in Precision View.
Yeah, so typically, the get started to get to that point project is probably a lot longer than what it takes now that we've gotten to that point. Typically 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how complex the use cases are that we're trying to go after. That particular project that resulted in what I showed was probably 10 to 12 weeks, but I'd say since doing that work, the time to deliver has come down, given some automation and some improvements on the machine learning side. So it's a much faster turn now, especially depending on the use cases that are in scope and the depth of the data and the detail.
Yeah, and then I think anybody who's done any sort of data science projects knows that the bulk of the work is all in trying to get the data that you need versus running it through the models and then trying to figure out how to present it. I think this is a question maybe for both of us. It was really kind of like how do we suggest that companies train their staff in Tableau? And I'll take a first stab at that, and then Eric, it'd be great if you wanted to talk about any of the, what you guys do with some of your clients that maybe aren't using Tableau to begin with. But the most wonderful thing about Tableau is it's easy to start using, and quickly people will discover just how complex that you can get with stuff under the wheels as you start going, and that's done intentionally, just through all the research and stuff that we do and how we've engineered the product. Is we don't want to make that barrier to entry too hard. And then as far as the training, now it's all the usual suspects, right? Using your favorite search engine tool and to say, how do I do this inside of Tableau? And you'll be blown away by the results that are going to come back through those searches. But also one thing that we pride ourselves on here at Tableau is just the passionate community that we have, and the willingness for people to help each other. So whether that's through our forums or through Tableau Public or attending the customer conference, those are all great ways for that. And then as organizations evolve, then it's actually creating training programs to onboard people, having leveraging some of our training platforms. We have e-learning platforms and other things that people can start to use as they start to get more advanced. But Eric, is there anything you'd want to add to that as far as services that you guys provide?
No, I think the only thing I would add would be in terms of industrialization. So I see a lot of clients that, to your point, because the barrier to entry is really low, thanks to all the great materials that you guys have produced or made available or put out there in the community and all that support that's available, is, as in your organizations, think about how you might want to structure how you use the tool and maybe establish some standards, some good practices, and how you foster that within your own internal communities, in addition to just the, get access, get up to speed on, how to get started. I think some of our clients have gone that step further, creating their own internal kind of leading practices around, how you store and structure some of the data that they use on a repeated basis, and making that efficient internally as well. So there's an opportunity there, I would say.
So Eric, is there anything else that you'd like to add before I close things out?
No, I think I would just reiterate that I've appreciated our partnership with Tableau on this. They've helped us quite a bit in terms of integrating some of the newer features and functionality like the Extensibility API. And so they've been a great partner to us in this. And this is a hot topic of conversation with a number of our clients. So we're very excited about integrating algorithmic forecasting and predictive analytics into solutions like what's offered by Tableau, because I think there's a ton of value in it for organizations. So just excited to have the opportunity to address the audience today.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. So this is a reminder, our Tableau Customer Conference is just a few weeks away in Las Vegas, and hopefully we can see all of you there. And again, thank you for joining us today, and be sure to check out all the resources that we referenced in the material today.